As the world slumbers and the city lights dim into a faint glow in the distance, there are moments that are unrecorded by cameras, not captured by headlines, but are precisely the most defining. Between the silence of the night and slowed breathing, Jungkook and Taehyung are in the one space they rarely let anyone in, the room of honesty without masks. The night did not ask them to be icons, did not demand a smile, did not charge perfection. That night just asked them to be human. Silence enveloped their conversation like a thin blanket warm, but full of weight. Jungkook began with a voice that was barely drowned out by the night. He talks about the fear that he has kept tidy, the fear that never finds a word because the world always demands courage, fear of losing direction when all eyes are on him, fear of making one wrong step that feels like falling without a safety net. He admitted that he often asks himself if he is still allowed to get tired. Taehyung listens, not as a star juxtaposed by the world, but rather as someone who understands the weight of breathing below expectations. He responded with the same quiet honesty, about the sense of emptiness that comes without warning, about the days when creativity feels like an obligation, not an escape. He talks about the fear of being a stranger to himself, when the mirror reflects a figure that everyone knows, but feels far from the one he feels inside. The conversation was not trying to find a winner or an instant solution. They do not interrupt each other, do not accumulate advice. There is only recognition present, that their fear is real, and that harboring it alone has made the burden even heavier. Jungkook admits that he often chooses silence to keep everyone safe, even when it hurts him. Taehyung admits that he often hides a longing to be understood, fearing that if he opens up, he will be misinterpreted. In the middle of the night, there was a moment when the words stopped. Not because there is nothing to say, but because understanding has found its way. Jungkook took a deep breath, as if releasing something that had been pressing on his chest for a long time. Taehyung looked at him with a look that needed no explanation. In that gaze, there's a tacit recognition that they're not alone, even when the world makes them feel that way. They talk about guilt, about the feeling of never having enough, about the burden of being a role model without a guide. Jungkook says that he often feels like he has to be the best version of himself at all times, and that the slightest failure feels like a betrayal of trust. Taehyung chimes in with his own story about the pressure to always be meaningful, always deep, always worthy of love. Two different fears meeting at the same point. However, the evening contained not only the recognition of wounds. There's also hope that appears slowly, like the first light of dawn. They talk about the possibility of a more honest life, about the courage to say no, about permission to rest without guilt. Jungkook said he wants to learn to trust the process, not just the outcome. Taehyung says that he wants to love himself without having to wait for validation. When the world outside remains asleep, they touch on early memories, the days when dreams seemed close and simple, when laughter wasn't measured by reactions, when being together was reason enough to endure. The memories are not escapades, but rather reminders that they once were, and still are, able to find meaning in the midst of simplicity. There's a recognition of the distance that has been created, not because of lack of care, but because of the fear of becoming a burden. Jungkook admits that he often refrains from being troublesome. Taehyung admits that he often expects others to understand without him needing to explain. In the evening, they agreed that assumptions had too long replaced conversations. The silence returned, but now it felt different. More spacious, safer. They sat side by side, sharing the realization that unspoken fears had finally found space. No big promises tied up, no dramatic declarations. Just a simple agreement to be present to each other, to ask when in doubt, to hear when tired. As time moved slowly towards morning, they rose with steps that were no longer as heavy as before. The world will return to demand, the spotlight will return to light, and the narrative will continue to build. But what happens when the world sleeps stays with them? A reminder that the quietest courage is often born at night, when two people choose honesty, face unspoken fears, and find strength not in perfection, but in togetherness. the night seemed to refuse to end. After a long pause that felt like a joint breath, Jungkook spoke again, this time quieter, more true to himself. He said that there was another fear that he had been hiding, the fear of losing the meaning of what he loved. Not a loss of popularity or stage, but rather a loss of taste when singing, when standing before the music that used to be a refuge. He is afraid that one day he will wake up and find that the passion has faded because he has been forced to endure it for too long. Taehyung listened with his eyes closed. He nodded slowly, then admitted that he had felt the same way. When art turned into a demand, and expression turned into a schedule. He said that the greatest fear is not to fail, but to succeed, but to lose yourself along the way. The sentence is dangling, heavy, yet feels honestly like a confession that has finally found a home. Their conversation then touches on the silence that often comes after the cheers. Jungkook said that the silence sometimes felt noisier than the crowd, filled with questions, self-assessments, and shadows of expectation. Taehyung replies by saying that Suwon can also be a teacher if given the chance. That perhaps, between pauses, they could again hear their own voice. There was a small laugh that appeared unplanned. Not a loud laugh, but a relieved laugh that marked something melting. They remember trivial things that used to make them laugh carefree. The moment does not erase the fear, but reminds that behind it, there is still room for lightness. When the conversation turns to the future, their tone remains simple. Jungkook said that he wanted to step without rushing, giving himself time to breathe. Taehyung says that he wants to be more courageous to be honest, even when honesty feels risky. They agreed that courage does not always mean fast forward, but conscious defense by dawn. The air turned cold. They stood side by side, looking at the night that slowly surrendered to the light. There's no big conclusion, just a small growing belief that facing fear together makes it feel more likely to pass. That honesty, though heavy, can be a bridge as the world begins to awaken. They step away carrying something unseen light, yet meaningful. The unspoken fear now has a name, and with it, no longer fully dominates. Among the remaining darkness and the first light of the morning, Jungkook and Taehyung discover one simple truth: that being human, with all its fragility, is the most real courage. Their steps slowly moved away from the place, but the echo of the night's conversation remained. Jungkook walked with a noticeably lighter shoulder, as if some of the weight he had been carrying had been placed on the desolate ground. He realized that his fear had not just disappeared, but that he was no longer alone in facing it. There's a new courage that is born from the realization that admitting fear is not a sign of weakness. Taehyung, on the other hand, felt a calmness he rarely encountered. He understands that all this time he has been hiding too often behind the image, too carefully keeping his distance so as not to get hurt. That night gave him permission to believe that openness does not always lead to loss, and that being understood is a possibility worth fighting for. As the morning light becomes clearer, the world returns to its usual rhythm. But for them, there's an invisible line that has been crossed. They no longer carry that fear as a depressing secret, but rather as part of a recognized self. In the midst of the upcoming rush, they know that there is one night when the world sleeps and two hearts choose to be honest. And perhaps that's where the real power begins, not in the spotlight coming back on, but in the silence that teaches them to remain human, to listen to each other, and to step in without having to pretend to be strong all the time.